Welcome to All Seasons Podcast. I'm your host, LoLo, a nurse, rainbow mama, holistic health nerd, and entrepreneur. This isn't your typical podcast. Some episodes are raw and juicy conversations, and others are mindful practices that will leave you encouraged. Together, we're creating a space that bridges the gap between black and white faith and the gray of real life. We will explore all things in all seasons of life, from loss, mental health, faith, motherhood, and holistic wellness. Come as you are, my friend. Let's jump right in. Welcome back to All Seasons Podcast. I am so looking forward to this episode, diving into one of my favorite self-discovery tools, the Enneagram, and with one of my favorite people in the world, Miss Kelsey Lincoln, who you guys will get to meet here in just a moment. She's one of my dear friends. Kelsey is a wife. She's a mama. She's a mental health advocate. And she can be found in her off time hiking around in Colorado Springs, where she currently lives. She has a BA in Youth and Community Studies from UT Austin, a MA in Intercultural Studies from Fuller Seminary, and is an Enneagram coach. She found the Enneagram in 2016 while she was in grad school. She wasn't into it at first and was actually mistyped for 2 years. When she herself finally found her type with a coach, she realized just how valuable the Enneagram is. She was tired of shame, anxiety, and relational missteps getting in the way of her life and relationships, so she sought more hope, understanding, and awareness of her internal world. Kelsey believes we're all made in such unique ways, and the world needs us to show up. Yet, each of us have our internal messaging that keeps us from living into that beauty and makes us who we are. She uses the Enneagram as a tool to engage clients with their whole selves and bring restoration to their inner world and relationships and the greater world to help them commission them and live in their divine design. So Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Sidebar. So Kelsey and I have been good friends for, almost a decade. And
Wow,
yes,
that's crazy.
And fun fact, Kelsey is married to one of our best friends. And I mean, I'm not going to take full credit because you guys did all the magic, but I mean, we got her and her now husband in the same place at the same time. A little matchmaking magic.
Yes.
And now look at us.
I mean, I think you guys get full credit. So there's that.
Oh, it's just
so forever grateful.
Yeah, it's just been so cool to see their story unfold, and now our lives are already connected, but now just so much more interconnected. So we're so grateful for that. So Kelsey, can you kind of take us back and share with us just a little bit more about who you are and your background and kind of your journey towards self-awareness and how you found the Enneagram?
Yes. So like you mentioned, first of all, I've always loved personality tools. You know, if it was like, does this color describe you? I was like, yes. Or just like learning about other people's, and it felt like it was just a really fun way to connect with people. And it wasn't until grad school where I heard about the Enneagram, and it just felt different than any other personality tool I'd heard about. It felt real and like, oh my gosh, this is like reading a book about who you are, you know? And at first, like you said, I was like, it's fun. It's okay. But I look it back now and I know it's because I mistyped. At this time, I took a test and I thought I was a 2, and that actually described me in so many ways. But it wasn't until later on, a few years down the road, that I actually had a Enneagram coach come to one of my work events, and the way he presented the Enneagram in such a different way helped me see that my true type is actually a 6. And that's kind of when I felt like the veil was lifted, and I felt like, wow, this explains so much.
Wow.
You know, just a moment of feeling very seen kind of for the first time and understood in a different way. And I think while the 2, like I said, had so many similarities to a 6, which now as a coach, I understand why and
Yeah.
all of that, I realized the motivations are what's
Yeah.
important, and that's when I realized the motivations of the 6,
Mm,
and so, since then, that was kind of the launching pad for the future of, Enneagram for my business,
mhm,
I just felt like, wow, this is so cool. And I see how effective it is in my
mm,
life and in my relationships, my marriage. I can only imagine how this can help so many other
mm,
people. And so that's when I really pursued getting certified as an Enneagram
mm.
coach. And since then, I've been coaching individuals and teams and businesses on how to get to know themselves better and each other, and it's just been such a
That
gift.
is so
So
neat. So for those of us who maybe aren't so familiar with the Enneagram, or we've heard it tossed around the table, oh, I'm a 6, I'm a 2, I'm a 5, and it feels like people are speaking another language. Can you, in very
mhm,
simple terms, like break down maybe the origin of the Enneagram, what the Enneagram is and is not?
totally. So it's been around for a long, 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 long time, but it's just kind of taken hold of different communities and groups of people, psychologists, and I think it just kind of had this explosion again, maybe in the last, I would say, 15 years, where it just really kind of started taking off in different circles, and now like more people have heard about it than they ever have. Um, and and I think a lot of it has shifted into, um, Christian circles as well. Anyway, so it's been a lot of different circles, and people have used it now in work
Mhm,
settings, and I think they've just seen it the importance
mhm,
of it. There's so many other ones, like you've heard of a Myers-Briggs, you've
mhm,
heard of a DISC assessment, and those are also great and
mhm,
helpful, but what sets the Enneagram apart is that it helps us get down to the why. So
mm,
what that means is, uh you can analyze behaviors all day. So, Myers-Briggs, you're like, "I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert," right? These are all attributes of who you are, which are very great and helpful for
mhm,
self-awareness, but the Enneagram gets down to
mhm.
motivations, which is telling us why we think, why we feel, and why we behave in certain ways. And so that all starts with the core
Wow.
motivations. So there are 9 types. Every type has what we call 4 core
Mhm,
motivations. The first one is a core fear, and so this is, what am I always trying to
mm.
get away from? What do I never want to, like, happen or be stuck in? Um, the core desire is the second one, and this is, what am I always trying to gain in my life? What am I trying to achieve and go after and make sure I have? The third one is core weakness, and I like to describe it as kind of the main theme that maybe has shown up in your
Mm,
life. So that will make sense when you hear kind of what they are. For like an example, for a one, it's resentment. And
mhm.
so, like, if you've heard, you just feel like, wow, that kind of explains a lot of relationships in
Yeah.
my life or things that keep coming up in my life. So that's a weakness. The last one is the core longing, and this is what the thing you always are trying to you've longed for. Your little kid brain and
Mm,
heart really needed to hear
wow.
these things. Again, for a one, it's you're good.
Mm,
And so maybe as a kid, you didn't hear that enough or you didn't believe it. And even as an adult, you still kind of maybe struggle
yeah,
with that, needing to
yeah.
hear those things. And so all the 9 types it manifests
Mhm,
differently for them, but the what makes up each type is those 4 core
mm,
motivations. Um, and again, we have
mhm,
behaviors, but if we only look at the behaviors, we may not find our
mm,
type. So it's really important to actually get down to what motivates you, and that's actually really
wow.
hard sometimes. Um, and so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a very
Mm,
quick,
yeah.
you know, origin part of
That
this.
that's really helpful. That's beautiful. I'm curious to know your insights on this. Like, do you believe that people are typed by nature or nurture? Like, are we born a 7, or is it our coping and our environment that's kind of developed us in that way?
Yeah, I think a lot of people and teachers will say it's
Mhm,
innate, so nature, but I personally think it's just a
mm,
both. It's the combination that's so
mhm,
important. I do if I were to, like, be forced
Mhm.
to pick one, I probably would say I think you are born
Mhm.
into it, and God-given,
Mhm.
if you like, in the beauty
Mhm.
of it, for sure, like, the gifting of what your
Mhm.
type is. But I do think, how you are nurtured affects how that plays out, you
Mm.
know? Um, and there's so many layers to
Yeah.
this, so it's always kind of hard to
Yeah.
simplify it, but we go to certain types as
Mhm.
well in our stress path
Mhm.
or in our growth
Mhm.
path. So when we feel the most integrated in ourselves or and we're growing and we're like I don't love to say best self,
Mhm.
but I guess most yeah,
Mhm.
integrated and healthiest self, we pull from a
Yeah.
different type. Each type has this. And then when we're in our living in a lot of stress or a really I don't like to say
Mhm.
trauma, but it could be that, some really intense things going on, or some just like maybe it's a little work stress. Like
Yeah.
you can still take and pull from another
Mhm.
type. And so you never change, your type always stays the same, but you are connected to other types that you pull from in certain stressful and healthy seasons.
Okay.
The reason I'm pointing that out is because I think in nature,
Mhm.
right? Um, and nurture, like let's just say your parent really you were living in a lot of stress by how you were
Mhm.
parented, you might look like a certain type because of you're living in that stress path. Whereas like you
Mhm.
really are a different type, but you take on behaviors of your stress
Wow.
path. So I know if someone is like just hearing that, like, what is happening? So because there is a lot. But yeah, if you look at like kind of even the symbol online of the Enneagram, you can see what types you're
Mhm.
connected to. So
Yeah. Oh, so good. This is so good. So I think that there's a lot of misinformation about the Enneagram out there. People will just be really fast to Google it and treat it like any other personality type, like, oh, like you're saying, what color describes my personality? And they kind of treat it in that way of
yeah,
like nonchalantly, I'm just going to take
yes.
this random free online test. Um, so if somebody like
Mhm.
really genuinely is like, okay, I'm ready. I want to know genuinely what my type is. What are the best avenues for them to kind of explore that?
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 options. The first one that almost everyone just kind of falls into is taking a test online. There's free ones, there's
Mhm.
paid ones. I personally am my own story is that I took a test and I
Mhm.
typed wrong. And that's the issue with tests is that they cannot be 100%
Mhm.
accurate, and they're not. And so there are some people who are very obvious types and they could test and it's like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
easy. I know I'm not that feels right." There are so many other types that it's very hard to kind of find your type
Mhm.
sometimes. And so a test I just like can be kind of maybe a starting point for
Mhm.
you. And it can maybe you take like the top 3 that you get and kind of just think about all 3 of those and read about them and get to know them.
Mhm.
And but I just don't always like to say like the test is the for
Mhm.
sure thing. It's just a great
Mhm.
starting point. The second option that I tell people is going to all the core motivations that I was talking about. So looking at all the 9 types, you can Google it, you can find it on my Instagram or um, my website, but it's all of the
Mhm.
9 types, all their core motivations, and reading through and see what fits me best. Because the reality is we actually have all 9 types within us, and
Mm.
we can relate to all of
Yeah.
them. So you might say, "Well, I have this and I have this," right? So you have to ask yourself, like, what is most
Mm.
true of me? What comes up the most
Mhm.
for me? Um, what over the course of my life has shown up the
Yeah.
most, right? So it's most true. It's not I'm only this type and I have no other qualities
Mm.
of any other type.
That's really freeing to
Um,
hear that.
so
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So I think reading open-minded, reading
Mhm.
all of them, and then seeing like what feels most true
Mhm.
for you. And then the last option is coaching with me or another coach. But I mean, personally, that's my story and why I became
Yeah.
a coach is I it was a journey of finding my type. It took me years, and it wasn't until I was with a coach that I
Yeah.
realized, "Oh, now I" because having someone in front of you to bounce questions off
Mhm.
or that actually knows the Enneagram in and
Mhm.
out and can guide you to finding your type is just really
Mhm.
helpful. So, all of those are options of finding your type.
That's so good. And Kelsey, and I'll have to grab a couple of those recommendations of the test books and obviously all of your coaching links, and we'll
Yes.
put that all in the show notes. So if that intrigues you
Perfect.
guys, we'll list all of her recommended resources. Um, okay, so you talked a little bit about, okay, you find your type. Can you kind of talk about two things? We'll talk about wings and we'll talk about where we go in stress and health. Um, so in any particular order, however you want to unpack each. But I'd love for you just to expand and kind of
Yeah.
share a little bit about like the nuances of the Enneagram, because there is so much more than just finding your type.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just the beginning, which can be a
Yeah.
journey, so, um, yes, okay, so you find your type. If you're looking at the symbol, it's a circle, excuse me, with all these lines kind of going
Uh-huh.
out and connecting each number
Mm-hmm.
to each other in different ways, so you'll have to once you look at it, you'll get what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying. And let's just say you're a 9, as an example. So on the Enneagram symbol, there is the numbers to the left and right of your number are 8 and 1 as a 9. And every type has a number to the left and right, as you can imagine, wings on a bird. And so they're called our
Mm-hmm.
wings. So each number, we like to say, you don't become this type of your wing. Again, kind of similar to the growth and stress I was talking about, but they add flavor to your type. So, a little salt and pepper, you take what you want and what comes naturally from one of these numbers to your left and right, more dominantly. Some people think you have one wing, and the reality is you don't. You have access to both wings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one probably comes more naturally and dominant to you. So let's say you're a 9, maybe you really have a strong one wing, like all the attributes and aspects and behaviors of one are adding to your
Mm-hmm.
nineness. And so you can really see that show up in you, like maybe you become a little bit more perfectionistic
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, or you really care about justice and right and wrong. Um, so all these things are adding to that your
Mm-hmm.
main type. But you actually have access to 8 as well. And so when I'm coaching people, I like to ask them what their dominant is, but like how can we bring in your
Mm-hmm.
other wing? Because it can serve you in really healthy ways as
Yeah.
well. And that's why it's there. And so um, our wings are there to utilize, but we can take from them in healthy and unhealthy ways. So if you're like, "Huh, what's," if you know your main type, go look to the number of your left and right. Those are
Mm-hmm.
your wings. And I would learn about them and kind of see, "Oh, I do this," or, "Oh, I see how that 4 shows up in me as a
Yeah.
3," or so you can ask yourself those questions, and it's just there as another tool
Mm.
part of it. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
the wings. Um, and then you want me to go into stress and
Yeah.
growth, right?
Yeah.
A little bit deeper? Okay. So, again, I'll use another type. So let's say you're a 2. When you're in stress, so naturally a 2 is gonna be this, like, really relational person who deeply cares about people and is always around people, always wanting to help. They wanna be needed in others' lives, they want
Mm-hmm.
love, and, they're always giving, giving, giving. They might be more people pleasers at times. Sometimes they might give a little bit to
Mm-hmm.
get in return, and so when they're in stress, what happens is they go 8, which they're
Wow.
pulling from 8. And what happens is they become really intense, or all of a sudden have all these really strict boundaries with you. And you're like, "Whoa, usually you're kind of doing whatever anyone wants and you're giving and you're people pleasing," but all of a sudden this 8 comes up and it stops a
Wow.
lot of that. And I like to say, like, our stress number isn't always
Yeah.
bad. It actually serves
Mm-hmm.
us. So in that way, it's like this 2 kind of gets to a point where they've been giving, giving,
Yeah.
giving, and maybe depleting themselves, and their 8 comes in to say, "Hey, you gotta stop, and you gotta take care
Yeah.
of yourself." Um, Kind of that
Mm-hmm.
burnout, they may hit it, and so they might deal with some anger, they might deal with some, might be more, like, forthright with
Mm-hmm.
people than they normally are, more direct. They might advocate for their
Mm-hmm.
needs. So, again, like I said, the stress isn't always
Mm-hmm.
bad. It has good and bad attributes to it, like, you might get angry, you might say things you didn't wish you said because you're in stress. But you also are gonna set boundaries, which is really healthy for twos, and you might start saying no to people, which is can be really helpful for the
Yeah.
twos. So that's how our stress path manifests. I'm using 2 as an example, but because it would take forever to go through
Yeah.
all these. Um, and then let's say 2 in their growth path or their healthiest path, that integrated path where we know ourselves, we feel like we've been really working on ourselves and our natural autopilot habits that maybe aren't serving us, and we've been addressing those things,
Mhm.
and, so 2s are gonna lean into their 4,
Mhm.
move to 4, pull from 4, however you wanna use that
Mhm.
language. And what happens is 4s are very,
Mhm.
individualistic, and they're very, intuitive and creative and very in touch with
Mhm.
themselves. And so, like I said, because 2s are so outward,
Mhm.
this is their growth, is to not always focus
Yeah.
on others, but be also focused on what's happening
Mm.
inside, taking care of themselves. So a lot of like self care, and we're not talking like just the
Mhm.
pampering, right? We're talking like internal
Yeah.
self-care, um, paying attention to their own
Mhm.
needs, and, yeah, there's so many things, I could keep going, but all that to say they're like that's the
Mhm.
integration part, and you're still a 2, and you have all the motivations
Yeah.
of a 2, but you're pulling these from 4 in the ways that, like,
Mhm.
help and
Yeah.
serve you. So,
Mhm.
that's a overview
Mhm.
of health and stress paths we go
Yeah,
down.
gosh, it's so beautiful, like, how once you really I mean, I know for some of you, if you're listening, you're like, "This is like a different language." I remember feeling that way, feeling like I was a voyeur or somebody on the outside, like, literally speaking a foreign language. But then, you just start to
Totally.
learn layer by layer. First your type. Okay, now I kind of understand myself. The light bulbs are going off. And then, like you're saying, you understand your wings a little bit. And then, yeah, you're basically giving yourself just more like cues and self-awareness to be like, okay, when this XYZ behavior or beliefs or whatever shows up, that's my cue to just be aware that, okay, maybe I'm moving into more stress or unhealth. And, um, I can just personally, the implementation for me has been understanding. So I'm a 7, um, understanding what that is, it really kind of freed me because I've actually viewed a lot of the attributes of a 7 as negative my whole life. Being a little flighty, being a little multi-passionate, right? Like having so many different things. And there was definitely a period of my life, for those of you who don't know, 7 is like adventurer or enthusiast. And we basically, at all costs, do not want to be boxed in or uncomfortable. And so we are constantly seeking positivity and escapism. Um, and so we can be a little bit of gluttons where we just want to accumulate all of the experiences and escapes. And there was definitely a part of my life when I look at like my early 20s, I was like, holy smokes. I was just, over consuming experiences and relationships and anything and everything I could to satiate a part of my identity that just felt so like unsatisfied is how I felt as a 7, like constantly wanting to devour life and everything in my path. And then getting to this place of like understanding my core desire for that, and recognizing, okay, these behaviors are really just symptoms of the driving force. And actually, like naming and understanding your driving force and the why behind your behaviors sometimes is enough. And it was enough for me to pause and to see myself almost as like, you zoom out and you're watching a movie almost of like watching myself do these behaviors and just scratching the surface. But gosh, the Enneagram has been a tool for me to like dive in and ask myself the deeper questions and find purpose and find like satiation and gratitude for where my feet are. And now I just have like language and tools and cues to understand like when I'm going into unhealth or stress. Um,
Yeah, that's so good. That's actually another way I like to describe it to people is like, this is just offering you a language to
Yeah.
use words to describe yourself or to your
Mhm.
partner or describe your
Yes.
partner or describe a friend or right family
Mhm.
member. It offers a language and
Mhm.
almost like a navigation
Totally.
system of like your internal world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think a lot of us just kind of, are on autopilot. We just kind of continue to do the same behaviors and we don't necessarily know why. And it's kind of just offering a owner's manual to be like, if you want to understand and fine tune, here's some language to do
yeah.
that. Um, so what, and you, if you want to get personal as you want to, you can. Um, how it's like on the ground in real life, how has this like helped your marriage, your friendships, your family system, your work relationships? Like, how has Enneagram actually impacted like your personal life?
Yeah, I think it's touched every part in varying levels. Uh, Definitely my marriage. I mean, and I've coached some married couples who are like in their 60s, let's
Mm.
say, and they're like, if we had this early on in our
Wow.
marriage, can you imagine how many like fights we would have just avoided? And I just feel so grateful that I met this tool so
Mm.
early. And there's so many other things you can use,
Yeah.
right? But I think in my marriage, definitely it's been so helpful of just like because instead of being like accusatory to your partner
Mhm.
of or your friend or a coworker of like their
Mhm.
behavior, when you like think of it this way, like if you hear um like if you're like, wow, that person's always angry, how annoying, you know? Or they're just hard to be around,
Mm.
right? But then if you hear like, well, they're angry because of, this horrible thing that's
Mhm.
happened to them, you
Yeah.
immediately have empathy, right? Doesn't mean the
Mhm.
behavior's okay, right? But you're like, wow, okay. And I think that's just a perfect picture of what it's done in so many of my relationships
Mm.
is once I understand the why
Yeah.
behind why my friend or my spouse or my family members doing these things,
Yeah.
um, it's like it offers so much more
Mm.
compassion. And so I can approach my relationships with that versus just judging the behavior.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big one. I think also it's helped me. I'm a type
Mhm.
6, and a lot of the 6 is anxiety. There's so much more to it, but we are labeled a little
Mm.
bit like that, and I think for so long, it was, like, just thinking I had
Mm.
anxiety, but not really understanding the way my brain
Yeah.
worked, and I think and I've been in therapy a lot as well, and bringing the Enneagram into my therapy actually was just so
Mm.
beneficial because it was like, I can describe what is happening in me, and then I can talk it out with
Yeah.
someone as well, and really understanding my
Yeah.
anxiety in a different way,
Wow.
um, and not just, like and having more compassion for myself
Yes.
even, and understanding, the way that I'm made up and why, and so I think compassion's a big one, and
Mhm.
I've also just really seen it be so helpful in team and work settings for
Yeah.
people, like, "Oh, my coworker actually functions better when I do
Mm.
this," or, "When I communicate this way, it triggers my
Yeah.
coworker." And, I tell teams all the time, like, "Doesn't mean you have to now be this perfect
Yeah.
communicator, right?" Or everyone gets what they want in this
Sure.
setting. But it's now just understanding how to best
Yeah.
communicate and options for
Yeah.
that, and trying to speak each other's
Mm.
language better, and so, it's
Totally.
done nothing but help all of my
Oh,
relationships, so
that's so
Mhm.
impactful. And what a gift. Like, just I think, we're
Mhm.
all wounded humans, right? Trying to do the best we can. And I love the Enneagram because it really is, yeah, it just like, not that like, oh, take it as Bible and like everything is 100%
No.
true for everyone. Oh, you're a four. Oh, you must be this way. But more so using
Yeah.
it as like, okay, I have a reference point for like generally who you are, how you may see the world, and how I can support you, be in friendship with you. Like how I love a two of my friends is completely different of how I love on my other fellow sevens or my nines. And that just comes with practice and knowing like how to approach and talk to people. But it's been just so amazing. Like Kelsey and I have been friends, like I said, for almost a decade. As a 7, I can be kind of flighty and she probably doesn't hear from me for months at a time. And then like I come in hot and I'm like, hey, girl, hey, what's up? Like, let's connect. And like, and I can imagine knowing who 7s are and who I am as your friend, you're like, okay, that's low. That's how she communicates, it's how she talks. Whereas like maybe some of your 2 friends, your text thread is like ding, 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 and you're like constantly talking. It's just whereas like if you held that
Yeah.
expectation of me, that would be hard, right? Because that's just not how I'm built relationally.
Mhm.
Um, the way I see
Mhm.
people and my energy and all that is just different. So it really does allow a lot of grace, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, and I think, um, offering, yeah, each other grace and understanding and trying to meet in the
Mhm.
middle, like, okay, low, like, we'll come in and out or
Mhm.
something, right? But maybe I really prefer
Mhm.
consistency, and
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, now low knows that
Yep.
about me, and I know that about her, so neither of us are mad when
Yeah.
now we're, you know, trying to communicate in certain ways, we
Yeah.
understand it, and so, yeah, I think that is
Mhm.
so big.
Yeah, I know. So, like, my journey with the Enneagram was, like, kinda knowing about it, figuring out my type. Then that I kinda stopped there, but then, I think just with you even, like, diving into it, Daniel and my husband and we had our 5-year anniversary. And, oh gosh, I think we were going to Costa Rica or something, and I was like we were boarding the plane, and I was like, "We have to do this and, like, unpack this on our 5-year, like, anniversary trip." And I just remember being LAX, like, fiercely figuring out, like, our types, and the test we took, it gave us this really in detail printout, and on the plane, we got to read each other's, and it was really cool because I felt like that whole trip we unpacked so many things about each other,
Mhm.
and I learned tremendous amounts of how I was miscommunicating or, like, just completely
Mhm.
missing him. Um, there were also examples of, like, common, conflicts between us, so, like, I'm a 7, he's a 9, and so it was, like, common conflict themes. And it was just like the light bulbs went off, and, like, I felt so much relief and freedom in that to be like, "Oh my gosh, this is not necessarily a Lauren and Daniel thing, this is just, like, how you're built, how I'm built, and if yeah, we can just meet in the middle." Um, and like you said, those
Yeah.
six-year-old people wishing they had this tool, like, if you are young, married, or even single, like, urge you and your partner do it early, like, figure it out, understand and know each other, know the patterns, know the conflicts. It's just so insightful.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not the end all be
Yeah.
all. I think it's important for people to hear that it's just a starting place, and we're all individual people with very different
Mm.
stories, but, like, as long as, like, 75 to 80% feels
Yeah.
true, I feel like that's a good gauge of, like, "Okay, like, this is my
Mhm.
type," you know? It doesn't need to be 100. I think it needs to be above any other type, and then also, like, "Okay, this feels most true for
Mhm.
me."
Yeah. There's this little nugget that my husband and I have actually gotten emails almost every single day since we did that test. We did it through the Enneagram Institute. And so you can pick up to 2 types and you'll get an email every day. It's like the tip of
Mhm.
the day. And so we get it into our emails. And so it's a 7 and a 9. And so it's just little nuggets to chew on each day and little insights for like how each of us see things. And just that little bite-sized thing, and I don't read the email every single day, let's be honest, but, like, the repetition of that and understanding, "Okay, this is how he views things or how he sees things," has just been really, really eye-opening. Um, really fast to back up, do you feel like there are any, like, big misses or, like, misuses or misconceptions about the Enneagram that as a coach, just, like, you're like, "No."
Oh, man. I think a lot of what I see is misconception of each
Mm.
type. That
Yeah.
makes sense? So maybe not necessarily, like, the Enneagram as a
Mhm.
whole, but, I mean, yes, there are, of course, misconceptions, that one, people think it's, like, this, like, not that big of a deal. No, it's, like, so
Yeah.
many layers, like, we've probably talked about
Yeah.
3%
There is
of
so
the
much
Enneagram
more.
today, so that just shows you there's, like, so much you could like, I'm almost 5, 6 years into this learning experience of it, and I'm still learning things all the time, so that just explains there's so much to learn, you've never really
Yeah.
arrived. Um, but so that's one misconception.
Mhm.
The second one I would say is just judging types
Mhm.
or thinking that like, I have an Instagram where I post a lot about
Mhm.
each type, and there are so many out there, and I think the reality is no person posting can actually fully encapsulate this exact type every time they post
Yeah.
about it, and so this isn't you're always gonna get someone who's like, "This isn't me as an 8," and it's like, "Well, generally
Sure.
speaking." But that just shows you, like, yes, each type does have, like,
Yeah.
grounding things that are true of
Mhm.
every type, but there's nuances to
Mhm.
all of them, and, also, yeah, just trying not to judge people based on, like, what you read about
Mhm.
a type and writing people off because of, "Oh, well, I know this type," and that happens a lot, and I really try to bring in compassion for every
Mhm.
type and that everyone is an
Yeah.
individual person. So, I would say that's kind of those are the big things,
Mm.
yeah, about the Enneagram that are
Yeah.
some pretty big
Mm.
misuses or
Well, I
misconceptions.
love the fact that you just brought up your Instagram because you guys have to go follow Kelsey. I'll put it in the show notes. But very often she will post memes of each, like, okay, yes, you post very deep, beautiful content, which I love. I love. But I have to say, my favorites are these hilarious memes that you find that are literally so spot on. So obviously it's just another like insight tool, but I feel so seen and or attacked sometimes with the number 7 memes. I'm
Yes,
like, oh my God, that's so me. It's just kind of fun to play around with it and have
so
those
fun.
like lighthearted insights.
Yes,
They're just crack me
yes.
up.
And that's a perfect example of, like, the memes are all
Yeah.
stereotypes. So, like, you can't even be
No.
offended because, yeah, it's just the stereotype of
Yeah.
it, so but it is fun, and that's why we do it, to laugh, so
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about, I know we've kind of like sprinkled it throughout our conversation, but like what are your offerings, services? Like how can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, so if you wanna do coaching with me, I offer a few things. One is Discover, and so that's if someone who this is their first hearing of the Enneagram, or maybe they were like me and mistyped for a while and still just feel unsure. That is me guiding you through finding your type, and, like I said, it isn't just like, "Take this test and be done," usually, sometimes it is for certain people, but some people really feel like they could be so many types, and so I help guide each person through each type, and we ask you a ton of questions and kind of get you there on your own. And then I have Grow, which is for people who know their type but wanna go deeper. And so, like I mentioned, there's just so many layers to the Enneagram, and there's so many ways to use it. And so, through these Grow sessions, we have 5 sessions where we kind of deep dive into you, like, you low as a 7, and we what do you like in stress? What do you like in growth? What are your communication tendencies? What are ways you wanna communicate better in relationships? Uh we talk about these things called triads and stances, which is all probably gibberish to
Yeah.
people right now, but, all really helping you just dive deeper into who you are as this
Hmm.
specific type. And then, I also have relationship
Hmm.
guides that are posted on my website, and you in these guides, they are specific to what each
Hmm.
type. So if you download it as a or buy it as a 1, you are reading what you are like as a 1 in
Hmm.
relationship to others. And so there's tips in that. There's for relationships, and it's not just romantic, right? It could be about you and your partner, or it could be about friends or family, and so it kind of goes through how you specific are in relationships, and it's really helpful. I think I've had some people, buy, if they're in a relationship, they buy each
Oh,
other.
cute.
So like if my husband and I are 6 and 9, and so I could buy the 9 and read about who he is in
Hmm.
relationships, and he can read about himself, and then I'll read about or then vice
Mhm.
versa. So that's an option for your relationships. And then, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Enneagram with Kelsey, and there I post some free content for you.
Awesome.
And
That
yeah.
is so cool. I love the work that you're doing. I think the work that you're doing is just literally setting people free, and commissioning them to really
Oh,
just
thanks.
live in their divine design. And I think, yeah, we just are so conditioned or shamed sometimes of how we feel innately who we are. And so I think it's just such a gift what you're doing for people. So thank you for sharing today and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
A question that we ask all of, or we, as in me, myself, and I, that I ask all of our guests is, in ode to all seasons of life, of motherhood, of faith, of health, all the seasons. What is one thing that has remained steadfast and true for you in all seasons of life?
Ooh. Well, first one is my faith,
Mm,
and I would definitely say my relationship with God is like foundation, even if it's like ebbed and
mm,
flowed in crazy ways throughout
yeah.
the years. Um, and I would say support, meaning
Mm,
community, friends, family, like always keep me grounded
yeah.
in life. And even if that's not perfect all the
Hmm.
time, I think I know that I can rely on my people is always a like firm and
Mm,
sure thing. And so I'm really grateful
mm.
for that. So yeah.
Beautiful word. Thank you so much. I just adore you.
Thank you for
And
having me.
maybe
Me
maybe
too.
we'll have you back for part two, diving into more of the nuances. But we'll let you guys like sit and chew on all of this amazing conversation from today. Such a great starting point for people.
Yes.
So thank you so much, and we'll see
Thank
you guys on the
you.
next episode. Please go ahead, like, share, and make sure that you write a review. If you happen to listen to this before December 10th, go ahead and write your review and take a screenshot and send it over to me on Instagram at LoLo Pause or A Soulful Sorrow, and I will enter you into a raffle and give you a $50 gift card for you to buy your own little gift for yourself at your favorite local store. So thank you all for listening. It means the world, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All Seasons podcast. I hope today's episode lit you up with inspiration and illuminated your path with clarity. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend. And also be sure to hit subscribe and leave a review. You can stay connected with me over at Instagram at LoLo Pause or A Soulful Sorrow. May you find your soul shine in all seasons. Until next time.